Okay, guys, so I'm here with Shoi, and he's going to take us through what he uses amp-wise. So, Shoi, I see you've got a Kemper, so
Yeah, so we've been with Kempo now. It's I think just about 2 years now. It was a big decision. I'm a bit old school really. So for me, it was always valve all the way through. But it was really a necessity more than anything else. I mean, when you're not, if you're a big band, you have crew carrying your stuff, and if anything goes wrong, then you've got people sort of sorting this out. It's not our case most of the time. When we're flying, we're trying to fly cheap, so anything. So we needed something where we could take our sound without sort of breaking the bank. So and having to put sort of amps in sort of in planes and all that. So I've been thinking about a Kemper for a while and sort of did a bit of research and then started to see actually a lot of guitarists, even in big bands, I mean, maybe bands like Creator and all that, they're all on Kempers now. Because it's just a lot easier to use. So yeah, so about a couple of years ago, we made the switch. So prior to that, I was actually playing on a Hughes and Kettner Core Blade amp.
Right.
So it's an interesting one because I approached Hughes and Kettner a few years ago by watching Jeff Waters of Annihilator playing them. And what I liked about the Hughes and Kettner was the fact that you can program them. So you can program your sound and you can USB them and go over to a festival and have your sound. Just for the story, in 2013 or something, we played a festival, and Hughes and Kettner actually it was in Germany, got the amps over there for us. And I noticed on the box it says Greg Howe. So Greg Howe had just used those amps, and I was like, wow, I'm playing on Greg Howe's. But yeah, so it was great. But then when it was a time, and we were starting to actually, unfortunately, having some problems with the amps because we toured a lot with them, and we decided, you know what, maybe it's time to switch to something a little bit more easy to carry. So the Kemper was a solution. Obviously, there's a couple of other solutions in the market. But I did like the fact that I could take my Hughes and Kettner sound that I really did like a lot and be able to profile it. So the main profile I'm running for most of my playing is the Hughes and Kettner Core Blade sound. So I think I'm taking the Ultra. It had two channels, Ultra 1 and Ultra 2.
Yeah.
So I'm running the Ultra 1 channel for my rhythm sound. The only other thing I had in front of it when I profiled it is a Maxon pedal.
What, the OD 808 or the OD 9?
808. That would be the one that I had. It did towards the end of my tenure with Hughes and Kettner. I started using that. And I was never a big believer in the sort of OD, overdrive pedal in front of your amp, but my God, it made a difference. I remember the first time I did it, Craig, our vocalist, he doesn't really know much about amps and anything like that. But I remember he looked at me and said, wow, what's that? What's going on with your amp there? Because that sounds really crushing.
Amazing.
And it does make a huge difference. And it's obviously the pedal that Eric Rutan uses a lot on all the Hate Eternal albums. He pretty much uses that pedal. And it does make a big difference. So I've got the Maxon pedal there. We profiled in the studio where our producer Pete actually works. So we actually did this properly in the studio. Because just ahead of recording The Blinding Light of Fate, we spent like a half a day effectively coming up with our sound. And he made all the difference because he meant that, throughout the entire recording process, we had the same consistent sound. And the sound that we eventually would end up with, we knew what it would sound like. And even when Pete would hear some guitar tracks and go, guys, I need you to redo that because it's not what I want, then there's no issues. Just dial up that patch and you're ready to go.
So when it came to playing live, did you find that you had to tweak that profile that you used for recording? Just a little bit?
Just a little bit. So what I've done sometimes live is sometimes I add a bit of reverb on my rhythm sound.
Oh, okay.
I add a little bit of it. It's just, it's a little tip I sort of, I watched Eric Peterson from Testament doing that. And what it does, it just adds a little bit more sort of roundness to your sound. But you've got to be careful. It's got to be very little amount of it because you don't want it to sound, you don't want too much of it.
Yeah, of course.
So you've got to be very careful. It's a little bit. But sometimes, depending on the venue, I'll switch it off. If I feel that maybe this venue is not the right place. Sometimes it could be the sound engineer just telling me, look, you might want to turn that reverb off because it's, conflicting with what I'm trying to do. So that would be generally what I would do. The other thing I do sort of bring down is the presence. The presence goes down because I don't want too much of a fizzy kind of sound.
Yeah, the harshness.
You want to cut down that harshness a little bit. In terms of the EQ, it's pretty simple, really. I haven't really messed around too much with it. I do add some mids because I do like my mids as well, and I think you need it. I'm not a big believer of the V shape, equal, EQ because I think
you're just scooping.
You're scooping the dynamics of the sound completely, and for the lead sound, I effectively use the same sound, just with an extra bit of the mids are pushed a little bit. So I don't push the volume that much. I just push the mids a little bit, and just worked on that distortion pedal a little bit, the overdrive pedal, and add a bit of delay. So it's just literally 2 sounds when I'm running on stage, nothing more. I don't want much more than that, really. I just wanted to keep it really simple. I want to enjoy the performance and not having to worry, oh, I've got to do this and got to do that, and so the other great thing about it, and I know some people think it's a bit of cheating, but the Kemper's got a great transposer as well. Yes. So when we were playing the previous album cycle, we still had some songs which were in standard. So rather than having to swap guitars, and we tried those songs in D, because we've gone down to D. We used to be standard. So we tried playing the songs in D. And maybe people listening wouldn't have felt it, but it felt so different to us that we just thought, you know what, it doesn't sound right. But at the same time, we didn't want to swap guitars and all that kind of stuff. So we actually used the transposer, and it's pretty crazy. I mean, it would pick up, we're pretty fast players, and it would pick up every little nuances.
So there's no latency or anything?
No latency at all. I mean, not that we experienced. Maybe if we went even a bit faster, it would do. But honestly, never heard any kind of latency. And it does feel like a bit of cheating. But sometimes when you're traveling and you can only take one guitar with you, it just makes a lot more sense.
It's the cost effectiveness and the balance of efficiency, and
absolutely,
with the way that technology is nowadays, I can imagine if you were going to go even like ridiculously lower, maybe it might make a difference, but you're going from D to E. So
no, exactly. And I mean, I also used to play in a covers band, which we would be playing things like Pink Floyd, and then a few songs later with Slipknot. And so apart from changing guitars because I needed some drop D guitars, I did, even for lower tunings, I did that because when you're playing in a pub, you just can't switch guitars every 5 seconds. Totally. It just doesn't work. That's pretty much it. I mean, I don't, and pedal wise in front of me, I'm using the Behringer, the FCB 1010.
Yep.
You know what? It does the job. It's nothing special. It's got the 2 expression pedals. I don't really do anything with them anyway. I don't have any wah on the album. Sometimes I use the volume just to cut out if I'm, in between songs. But I'm actually looking to sort of swap to a much smaller foot switch, just because the FCB is a bit big, and when I really literally just need 2, maybe I had to push 3 patches. Like we used to have a lot of clean sections in Profundis. We've got rid of them. We don't really have any clean sections, so it really is down to now 2 patches. Which feels a bit overkill to have that thing with 10 patches.
Totally.
So, and that's it really. And then other pedals on stage, I'll have my my tuner. I sometimes use the tuner from here. Otherwise, it's an old Boss tuner pedal in front of it, and my Line 6 wireless, and that's pretty much it. It's really, really simple.
So how do you run the Kemper? I mean, do you use a cab on stage, or do you just have the Kemper go straight to front of house? Or
a bit of both. So this is a powered version, obviously.
Yes.
Because obviously we wanted to use this live and didn't want to have to buy another power. On stage, I tend to like the sound coming out of a cab. Again, I feel I see lots of bands these days don't have any sound apart from drums. Don't have any sound. Everything's in ear and everything. To me, I find that a bit. I haven't done it, but it feels a bit stale. I like sort of the balls on stage. That's what I like. Why I like this kind of music. So I remember years ago I went to a gig. We supported this band, and they were literally playing. All there was is the drums. Even that I think was an electric kit or something. And I remember everything was coming through the front of house, but there was no sound on stage. And I literally remember having a conversation with somebody just at this volume while the band was playing. It didn't even feel like a band was playing. And I don't, and I think that, no matter how much you put in through the front of house, if there's not, the balls are not coming from stage, the power isn't coming from stage, you're not really going to be able to replicate it.
I see, yeah.
So I do use the cab, but most of the time I think sound engineers prefer to just take the output directly, because you just get a clarity of sound, which I can totally understand that.
Yeah, because you're not using mics, and you're not
using mics, and then they'll program. I mean, like as an example, on the Belfagor tour, we were very lucky that we had the same sound engineer throughout the whole tour. He was the tour sound engineer, and first night he set things up on his iPad and all that, and every night he pretty much used the same thing, and we had the same sound every night. And it was great. It was no complaint at all, and it was no surprise that I would say from a playing point of view, it was probably the best tour we've done from a playing perspective, because every night we could hear ourselves. It was the same mix. It makes a difference. And for a band like us, where we're not sort of tech deaf, but at the same time there are technical elements to what we do, and we have riffs and not sort of it's not black metal where you have sort of long passages of chords. It's a lot of riffs. So you want the clarity of sound, which I think the Kemper really does that. I think the sad part is, where does that leave us with valve amps? I don't really know. I think, you can see more and more bands are switching to it. It's
digital, yeah.
It's just, again, when bands are playing across 100 and 200 shows a year, with a valve amp, you're going to have some issues throughout the tour. So,
That's awesome. All right, cool. Well, now we'll move on to Paul's rig.
Cool.
And thank you very much, man. That was awesome.
Man.
Cheers. Okay, so now we have Paul here. He's going to take us through his rig. So, Paul, I see you're also running a Kemper.
Yes, like Shoi, once upon a time, I was one of those. Oh no, digital will never be the sound of an amp made of valves and tubes and flesh and blood or whatever. The old thing is.
I love it.
Both these heads you see here are heads which were heads of mine, and I used to gig with both of these, but I think that no matter how much of a stick in the mud you want to be about that kind of thing, you do enough shows where stuff goes wrong. You have a head that went. I did a show in a venue in Port Talbot with like one of the worst kind of electric setups I ever had, and literally both. The only way we could have both heads plugged in for this show was that we had this one plugged in, and then the guitar player in that band had an Ingle, and there was an extension, there was an extension socket suspended above the drummer, because that's the only way we could get to stretch.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
Insane.
And no surprises, they're both amps started having problems, and sometimes sometimes it can cost almost as much as like half one of these cabs just to get something very, very simple fixed. And I don't know, for me it just really wasn't worth that hassle anymore.
Yeah.
With the Kemper, I get. I was skeptical at first. I was skeptical. The first time I started to see this kind of engineering kind of take place was actually seeing the Axe-Fx.
Yes,
obviously that kind of took hold at first, and it was actually the first time I saw an Axe-Fx being used properly. It was a clinic I went to see of Greg Howe.
Yeah.
And he said something very, very similar, where he was like, "Oh well, I used to be just analog, and then I started using this." And then the first I saw of the Kemper, it was a video of Andy Sneap talking about, I think it was a Testament record he was working on, and it looked incredible. It looked, and it seemed to have a sort of a little bit more of that tubey natural sound, which you don't really get with the Axe-Fx.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely for me, I started to kind of correlate the sound of the Axe-Fx with the sound of a lot of the modern kind of gent players, which isn't quite what I want. And with the Kemper, you get that. It's incredible, some of the stuff you find on here. I mean, I remember when we were recording the album. Now, one interesting thing about the way we did the guitars on the Blinding Light of Faith, there is no cabs.
Yeah.
It's all straight off these. So we have the cabs in, and at first I was like, okay, that's maybe that might be a little bit too radical. I'm not sure if I can get behind that, but you know what? I like the sound of it. Is
well, it's essentially the profile of the actual sound.
Yes.
Whilst there will be factors like what room you're in and all that kind of stuff. You won't get that feel of the cab pushing air, but what you're hearing is the sound of it. Through a full response set of speakers, and it is that sound mic'd up, but just in there. So you do still get, the level of dynamics that, whereas I guess the difference between the Axe-Fx is more centered around dialing in your specific, parameter that you want to get as close to that sound.
Well, one thing that I found very funny was, I had a friend come over to mine once when I had just gotten the Kemper, and I was like, check this out, and he was like, okay, it's cool, but it doesn't have that warmth of a tube amp, and I was like, let me get that for you. So onto amp, I adjusted, the tube sound, the warmth, and put the clarity down a bit, and it was like, huh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the actual sound I'm using, it was I used a Switchblade as the basis for my sound, and sure, I used that Maxon OD to just push it that little bit more. To be honest, I always preferred the sound of the Switchblade over the core blade. As Shoi said, it's a very particular sound. It's not just chugging a low E string for ad infinitum. We have a lot of stuff going on, and we have Aaron playing his 6-string fretless bass in the back. You can't really you've got to be careful with the settings. When we go to shows and we get these out, a lot of the times I see the sound people at these shows going, okay, good. It's
Yeah.
kind of like, okay,
I've
I
had
don't
that.
have to worry about you.
Yeah, I've had that before. So in terms of the difference between yourself and Shoi, in terms of the sounds, I mean, did you use similar profiles, or is it?
It's we kind of it to a certain extent matches up. I would say there's difference between our sounds is very different. It's very similar to the difference between our guitar sounds. So I've got that slightly more mid-range sound, and he's got the slight more aggression. And as a result, we've both tweaked our Kempers to get more of a live kind of sound. And I think that's important. Although I like having the tone, I like having the profile which we did the album with. Live and in the studio are two different things.
Yeah.
So you've got to tweak it a little bit. So that's exactly what I've done. I've boosted quite a lot of things. I've got the middle up, a bit more treble and presence. Just cranked the gain ever so slightly. With my leads, the gain comes down a touch and the mids go up, and obviously
That's interesting actually, because I personally do the opposite. When I switch to a lead channel, my gain comes up a touch.
Okay.
And my presence will come up a little bit more. So it's interesting you saying that you actually bring the gain down, but then you boost the mid.
Well,
so,
I think the part of that is the way that I do leads as well. I mean, Shoi I know does a lot of his leads on the neck pickup. I'm actually a lot of the time
on the
I
bridge.
stick to I use the bridge pickup a lot. I mean, I use my neck for like melodic lines or clean parts and stuff like that. But I like having that slightly bitier. Again, going back to all these kind of like 80s kind of dudes.
That's the proper Paul Gilbert thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or and as a result, you get a little bit more harmonic response, I find.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I would never, ever, ever do that weird thing that people do where they have one pickup on a guitar and no pickup switch. Just something about that triggers a very, very deep kind of anxiety in me. It just looks wrong.
It looks wrong.
But yeah. So just because of the way I do my sounds, I don't need that extra bit of gain, which I would need if I was primarily using the bridge pickup.
So do you run this in the same way as Shoi?
It really does depend on whoever's running sound at a show. I mean, when I do, for some of the other gigs I do outside of Profundis, it can depend upon that. I do quite a few bass gigs. I was doing some shows on bass for a band which uses a lot of kind of traditional Eastern instruments, and the only properly electric instrument on stage is the bass. And so I was running. The Kemper's got some incredible bass sounds as well, and I was running those with. They've got some great effects on there, so you could just get this real kind of ethereal sounding, like almost like electronica influenced bass sounds. And when I was doing that, I just did it. I didn't use a cab. I just run it straight. And when I've done like non-metal shows, that's all I'll do.
Right.
I will just run it straight into the PA, and I'm happy with that.
So in terms of like lead sounds, I mean, do you use any sort of like delays or reverbs or anything?
Yeah,
like that?
I do that same Eric Peterson trick that Shoi does with a little bit of reverb on the rhythms, but just a touch. And then with it's the old kind of thing of just a load of delay and a load of reverb for my lead sounds. On the album, we do quite a lot more. There's a lot of the like little melodies will have something like tremolo, phaser, whatever have you. I don't bother with that live yet. I have 4 settings live. I have my main rhythm tone, I have my full-on lead, I have a fills tone, which is just a rhythm part with a tiny bit more volume and a little bit more mid, and then I have my clean setting, because the few clean sections on the Blinding Light of Faith are generally done by me. I'm also using the Behringer FCB.
Right.
It's just before that I was using an old ART X11.
Okay.
Now the FCB is slightly more convenient because it's like run like through a kettle lead, which is a little bit, and it's a bit sturdy in general. But there is one very, very key reason why I prefer the ART X11. It looks cooler.
It looks cooler.
It looks way cooler. It's got the best color scheme you've ever seen in your life. It's like black and metallic pink. Right. It looks like straight out of Stranger Things or something. I love it.
Amazing.
I love it. But despite that, it's a little bit heavier because it's completely out of like metal, and it's got like these sharp edges. It would be a convincing murder weapon.
Well, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you for the very detailed rig rundown, which was awesome. And you guys have been watching Quinton's Guitar Corner. Thanks very much to Paul and Shoi for taking the time to take us through their guitars and their rigs. Where can we find you guys online?
Well, you can find us on our website, or you can deprofundistheband.com, or on any of the social media apps which we are all forced to use in this strange dystopian time that we live in. As well as that, you can check out our record label Transcending Obscurity, which is, well, unbiased, but one of the finest extreme metal labels in all the world right now. And so from them you can get our new album, The Blinding Light of Faith, which has these and has these played with a lot of gain.
Nice. All right, cool. Cheers, guys. Thank you.